This is Mark from 10 Pound Gorilla. We're going to take a look today at the exploit that allows a hacker to create a host user in all versions of DNN 7. We're going to cover in this video how to check your site to see if it has been hit by this exploit, and if it has, how to track what may have been done. And then we'll take a quick look at how to secure your site so that you know that it can't happen again or won't happen at all if it hasn't already. The first and most obvious indicator that there might be a problem is that the SMTP settings on your site just stop working. The second symptom is at least one, but possibly more host level users have been created. A simple way to check for host users is to go to the host menu and click super user accounts. We're going to use the host SQL tool to check your system and see if indeed a hacker has used it to create a host user, and then from there to track through the system and see what they may have done. Before we drop into the scripts and how to use them, it's very important for me to bring up these three things that you need to do. First, you need to get a good backup of your site. Second, you need to get a good backup of your site. And third, you need to get a good backup of your site. Now we're going to go ahead and click on the host menu, and from there go to the SQL module. That's going to give us a place to run the script that we provided you with that'll give you a list of all the host users on your site. That script is called List All Host Users with Quick Identifiers and is in the file named script1. Once we've copied that in, we're going to go ahead and we're going to click the Run Script button. So here is an example of a site that has a host user created. Let's take a look at what the important things are to note here. The first thing that we want to take a close look at is the usernames. We want to make sure that we recognize all of these usernames and that they were created when we expected them to be created. This user is an example of a user that is not a legitimate user and was created by the exploit. So we need to make a note of the user ID because we're going to use that to track the user through the system. I want to take a second to show you another site that actually has had the exploit run on it 2 times, so there are 2 host users created. This is something that you need to consider, and you may have to track more than one user through the system. So now that we've taken a look at the host users, we've determined either A, that our site has not been affected by this exploit, or B, that it has. So now that we know what the status of our site is, we need to close up this hole that allows this exploit to be carried out. It's relatively simple, but you will need access to either the file system or to an FTP to get to the root of your site. Once you're there, you're going to look for a folder named Install. When you click into that folder, you'll see a file list that looks similar to that shown here in the video. Then you're simply going to delete 2 files from this folder, the installwizard.aspx and the installwizard.aspx.cs. So it's important to note that these 2 files aren't really necessary for your DNN install to operate correctly. They were only needed when you did your initial install. There's a wizard that appears that lets you enter your host user and some other database information. It's also important to take into consideration that should you do an upgrade from any version of 7 to any newer version of 7, those files are going to be replaced. You need to go back into the install directory and delete those files again. If you recently upgraded from version 7 to version 8, then take the time to check your install directory and make sure that those files are not still there. They could be there from your version 7 install. I haven't personally tested the exploit against version 8 if those files were still there from version 7, but the fact that they were ever used in an exploit, the best practice would just be to make sure that they are no longer there. So what if you found that there is a user on your site and that the exploit has been run at least to create that user, if not to do some other malicious activities? What do you do? Remember that when we showed you that host user when you ran that first script, that you were able to see the created on date and the ID. Those 2 things are going to be very valuable moving forward. So we can see that this user was created on June 1st at 3:02 p.m. So the ideal situation would be to simply roll back to a backup from before this time. Don't forget that if you do restore your file system and your database, that you're going to restore that installwizard.aspx and installwizard.aspx.cs files. You need to go back to that folder and delete both of those files. Now we need to look at what happens if you can't restore. Perhaps your restore is bad, you don't have one, or you have a very active site where rolling back would create other issues. Well, this is never the recommended course of action. It's always best to restore to a previous point in time We do recognize that there are cases where you're going to need to try to clean your site up. There is no way to 100% guarantee that your site is clean. I will provide you with some guidance, but if you must manually clean your site, please consider your experience level and possibly seek professional help. Let's take a look now at the script named script2.txt that's available for download on the page this video is on. All you have to do to this script is change where it says enter user ID here, replace that text with the number that you found of the user ID of the host user that was created by the exploit. We're going to go ahead and copy that entire script into the host SQL script area, and then we're going to click on the run script. Once you run the script, you're going to have a number of tabs at the bottom of the page, some with results, some without. We're going to focus on tabs 2, 6, and 9. But we will discuss briefly the other tabs to see what those may be showing us and what you should do if you find data in those tabs. The first tab is showing us the results from the user table, checking to see if any user had been modified by the exploit host user. We haven't experienced any users being modified yet other than the host that was created by the exploit. So I would expect that you would see the query did not return any data. If you do see results here, as with some of the other tabs that we're not going to cover, and you don't know how to deal with it, please reach out to someone who does. We provided these extra scripts so that you're aware if some changes were made so that you can further track it. It's important for you to check these things, but it's not possible for us to cover every possibility in this video. Tab 2 is always going to have results if you determine that the exploit was run. The exploit actually resets a number of your host settings, and you should go into host settings and review those to make sure that you've reset them all. We discussed earlier that you of course lose your SMTP settings. It also will reset many of your performance settings in many cases. One of the most important settings to note here is the file extensions settings. This is the setting that determines what file types are allowed to be uploaded through the file manager in either host or admin on your site. There are 3 different extensions that may be added to this file extensions that we've seen so far: ASPX, ASP, and PHP. Those 3 extensions need to be removed immediately. You can do this by browsing to the host settings, going to the Other tab, and editing the allowable file extensions. Remove ASPX, ASP, and PHP. Then save. Let's move on to tab 6. Tab 6 is the tab modules table. This is the table where the header and the footer of the module that you put on the page are stored. The header and the footer have always been a good place to inject scripts if the module that you were adding needed them. The hackers are often using either the header or the footer of the module to inject a script that will then cause that pop-up to come up that will lock your browser up and try to get you to call an 800 number to get their help. The kind of help you definitely don't need. In order to reset that header and footer setting from the interface, you're going to need to go to the module settings for the affected module and click on the header or the footer, reset, and save those values. They can be difficult to identify, so I've provided some scripts to make it a little easier for you to accomplish this task. The name of that script is module settings fix scripts.txt. So this is what the script will look like. You may just open it in Notepad or any text editor. I'm using Sublime Text, so it has some nice features for syntax highlighting. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the information that we know in. So in this case, we know that the user ID was 4832, the tab ID was 1137, so we select all that, and the module ID was 1722. You want to replace the My Site with your actual fully qualified URL, so we're going to say www.mysite.com. Alright, now all we have to do is select this whole thing and copy it into the SQL module. Now we're going to go ahead to the SQL module and we're going to paste our script in. We see that we've got good numbers for the user ID. Also make sure that you still have the quotes around your site name or this will not work. Okay, so we go ahead and we click Run Script. So once we get back our results, we go ahead and scroll down and take a look at them. Query 1 module settings page link. That's going to give us a link that goes directly into the module settings so that you don't have to figure out which module it is on your site that has this header or footer injected. Now, if you have the pop-ups turned off in your user interface, user experience, it's going to cause this not to work unless you click on the edit page. So just copy the URL into a new tab or window and then just click edit page and it'll take you to the settings. Otherwise, it should come right up into module settings. So that gets you to it if you want to do it from the interface. Now, if you'd rather just use a query to change it, here is a query that if you reset module footer to blank, what this will do is reset the module footer to null. Now keep in mind that if you had some other value in there for a script that the module required, you're going to have to figure that back out. But this will reset the footer to null. So all you have to do is copy this and then paste it back into this section up top and run that, and that will go ahead and set this to null. Now we're going to take a look at the third one. The third one is the same thing, except it's going to reset the header to blank. So again, you select this whole query from update down to the module ID and copy that into your SQL module, and that will reset the header quickly. Now we're going to talk about query 9 briefly. This query is looking at the event viewer, so you're going to be able to see a lot of the things that a user does as they move through the site. If they update a module, if they delete a module, if they add a module to a page. So it's a good way to kind of audit the things that you've found. This is going to give you a good look at the database and what the user has done inside of DNN. Now, something you have to consider is that we looked a while back at the fact that they added into the allowed file types .aspx, .asp, and .php. That gives the hacker the ability to upload a rogue ASPX, ASP, or PHP file that could grant them access to the file system, allow them to edit files, other processes on your server inside of your website. Now this can get a little bit more complicated because they also have the ability to edit files without changing the date. So this means that it's not always possible to just look for files that have a change date around the time that they access the system. One of the most common exploits that we've seen to date is that they will add a line of code to the bottom of your default.aspx, which means this will render on every single page on your site. Here we're looking at the default.aspx, the very last lines of the file. You'll notice that there is a script just below the client resource loader that goes all the way to the closing body tag. You could remove this, but the safest thing to do is download the version of DNN that you have installed, either the install or the upgrade, and take the default.aspx out of that package and upload it to the root of your site. We have also recently seen that they have embedded a script in the dnn.js file. There's no doubt that these hackers will probably see this video and every other video or informational blog that's out there and then change the way that they're attacking the sites that aren't patched. So this is really just an initial guide and to give you an idea of the steps that you have to take from a file system standpoint to find the files that they may have dropped on your site or that they may have modified. You have to be very diligent in checking file uploads, file modifications, and site changes, because undoubtedly they're going to change what they're doing to try and hide their actions from you. DNN Corp has released a security analyzer module that you can install on your site and then access via Host Security Analyzer. It's free to download from Codeplex, and I'll provide a link in the description. When you follow the link, you should see a latest release, and below that a download. You can download and install this module just like any other module. The next security video I'll put out will cover the security analyzer and then update you with any other details we may have on this exploit. We'll also continue to update the page on 10-Pound Gorilla and also in the video description to keep you up to date on any new developments. Well, thanks for watching, and if you need help, if you're not sure how to do any of this, you need some advice, or you need us to look at your site, feel free to contact us on the forum on our site, or you can reach out to me at mark@10poundgorilla.com.